All right, let me get into it. Another late night as I head home. So, busted, right? There's a saying about, they say B-dubs or black moms. And it goes a little something like, black women love their sons but raise their daughters, right? So in my family, I have a lot of female educators. The men, pretty hands-on, not typically 9 to 5 guys, but they make their way. But the women in my family are mostly teachers, principals, that kind of thing growing up. Hospital administrators, that kind of thing. So being raised by a single, like I said, it's not to down anybody. I'm just telling my experience. And I just find it funny how the life I live is way more common than I could have imagined. So like I said, I'm early 50s, sexually active regularly since about 15. So you're talking about over 30 some odd years, right? Let me see, 15. Yeah, over 30 some odd years. Sex regularly since about 15, but my first experience probably was about 10. I think around 13, 14 years old, had a lot of I was young and bashful, good looking little kid, didn't have it all secondhand, hand me down clothes, that kind of thing. But single parent, 6 kids, what do you expect, right? But at that time, it was probably 4 of us by that time, four boys. I definitely wore secondhand stuff for my older brother. His godparent and paternal grandparents were pretty active in his life and supplied a lot of things. May not so much. My godmother was great, but didn't, and I didn't know my father's family, so. My alleged father's family. So, I just didn't have all that. So a lot of stuff that I got or wore was, a lot of it was hand-me-down stuff. So what am I talking about here? So the best advice, so as I'm getting older and hormones is raging and girls are doing their thing, where I lived, there was sisters. There was these sisters held me down, gave me a hickey on my neck. So I come home, my mother sees it, and the only sexual mind you, she's an educator now. So the only sexual education I've ever gotten in my life was from my mother, and she said, if I come home with a baby, I'm still going to school. That's it. End of story, right? That's it, end of story. Was that the only sexual education that I've ever gotten was if I have a baby, and this, like I said, this had to be about 13, 14 years old, because then by 15, I got my first real girlfriend, and the rest is history. So it had to be about 13, 14. And like I said, 2 sisters held me down trying to be funny. They gave me a hickey, and so this is the first time sex has really come up. Though I've probably been busy, touchy-feely, poking things with, with your fingers and those kinds of things. That's probably been going on, dry humping, probably been going on since about 10. But this is the first time that between me and my mother, any type of conversation of sex has come up. So she said basically, well, what she said was, if I have a baby, I'm still going to school. That was it. Like I said, he's a teacher, and a house full of boys. I have a family. My first cousins are like my brothers. No, we was raised more like brothers, more like siblings than cousins and distant cousins and those kinds of things. So house full of boys. But that's about the only sex education that I've ever gotten, was that if I have a baby, I'm still going to school. Needless to say, I dropped out my singing year because I had a baby on my way. By 18, he was, a girl was definitely pregnant by 18. He was born just before he was born 4 months before my 19th birthday. Own apartment by that time. and the rest is history. I say all that to say is, I believe Tommy Sotomayor first said, at least I think it was Tommy who said that, do you blame the one who left or do you blame the one that was there? Meaning, without interruption, without distraction, my mother has had the education to steer me in the right direction. I've always been interested in media. I've gone to schools, she's put me in schools out of convenience, not necessarily honing in on my interests, and put me in the right places, even though she has had access to, she always had access to firsthand information, being in the school system herself, having best friends and siblings in the school system who were administrators, principals. So there's a lot of access that she's had to help me get me where I need to be. Like I said before, I used to be a kid who stuttered, and I've kind of corrected my stuttering through outside means, not firsthand with my mother helping me get where it is that I need to be, so that way I don't have these kind of impediments. You understand what I'm saying? It goes back to what you hear nowadays is, the black woman, the B-dub, as they say, is the most educated, even more so now than at that time. You talking about, by this time, this is early 80s. And my family was already in the business of education, but it never trickled down to us boys. If it wasn't for, like I said before, if it wasn't for the group of boys that I grew up with, who came up with their own, we had a code and moral character, and I was lucky to grow up with a great bunch of guys. We just coming up out of the 70s where Big Brother had his hand in pulling families apart. In my home, I've never had that dad situation outside of my younger brothers. They had their dad, who was, I consider my stepfather, though my mother and him have never been married. He was killed very early on. I know more of my brother's father than they do, because he died early in their life. They was probably 1 or 2 years old, and 2 and 3 years old maybe, and he got killed. But nonetheless, though, the best advice I've ever got from a black single mother was, if I have a baby, I'm still going to school. As opposed to being proactive to say, what's happening, what's going, let's sit down, let's talk. How, I see that you're interested and you're involved. This is how you protect yourself. Is there anybody special? Is anybody seeing? Have you done anything yet? There was no investigation. It was, if you get a girl pregnant, if you come home with a baby, you're still going to school. That was it. So all this talk now about, it seems like the hammer's coming down on the women in my community. I can totally understand where it's all coming from. It's not an all of a sudden thing. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I'm here to tell my stories about it. Like I said, I consider myself lucky. I feel compelled to almost to kind of I feel compelled to be proactive, to kind of help a guy, a young black man who's on his way up in this thing called life, help him stay on the right path, to perhaps recognize to kind of help interpret things that he may not be able to understand, or something might be piquing his interest, or there's something there's a red flag somewhere and he doesn't know how to interpret it. I've been there. I understand it. There's been a lot of things that I've been putting in my knapsack that it isn't until within the last 5 to 7 years I was able to get clarity on what was happening, what it is I was experiencing, what it is that I was seeing. You know, it's not until now that I can articulate it. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a lot of truth with the women in our community being the most educated, but also the most indebted. You know, they seem to have catered to themselves before they actually had a hand in the development of their children, especially their boys. Especially their boys. They left us out there on our own to survive and figure it out on our, to figure it out ourselves. And I am a testimony to that. I consider myself lucky. I've been able to get fairly good jobs, but in progressing, I've been adding on to the weight. And it doesn't get easier. Every time I pivot, it doesn't get easier. You know, I should be shedding the weight as I get older, but it seems like, I'm dragging more weight. And if I can help somebody not even put that weight on them, I'm here for you. I'm all for it. So I'm going to get up out of here. It's your boy, Brian Keith. Remember, stay proactive, stay productive, and most definitely stay positive. All right, it's your boy, Brian Keith, man. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.